And then with Lincoln, I mean, it's pretty obvious, just frame, athleticism, ball skills, very much fits the new age tight end. And I think it's really awesome too that we continue to find kids that in Kansas that aren't right there in like the Kansas City area, because it would really be easy to just swing through the Blue Valley School and just sweep that. It's I think it's awesome that we're continue to find guys in different parts of the state.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here, as always, with Ryan Wallace from GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports to talk about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. This week, we have an interview with a colleague of Ryan's and a former colleague of mine, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst, Alan Trieu, the foremost expert on Midwest recruiting. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us. Subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us to grow the show and get us in front of more people like you. Ryan, our string of great luck continued this past week.
Unreal.
Yet another close game. This time with it heading into overtime, St. Thomas Aquinas outlasting Rockhurst 14-13.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild. I'll be honest. I thought for a second there that Kelly Donahoe, more than just a second, I still think maybe Kelly Donahoe and Rockhurst should have gone for it on the 2-point conversion in regulation, because then they get into overtime and had a chance to go to a second overtime, Kevin, and the PAT just did not work out. St. Thomas Aquinas comes back to Kansas with a victory. Like you said, it was maybe not the most entertaining way to get to overtime. It was a defensive battle, but man, that last quarter, that fourth quarter, had everything that all the fans there wanted and everybody that wasn't there kind of expected from those two programs.
A really physical game, and we're going to tap into a guy who played really physically. Ryan, in this case, we're leaving the gridiron a little bit for our Unsung Star of the Week, because while we are mentioning St. Thomas Aquinas' Crew Huenfeld for what he did on the football field against Rockhurst, he really has a bright future in another sport.
Yeah, he's going to be a Jayhawk as a baseball player. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Kevin, he's a pitcher and first base. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Jayhawks are taking him to be kind of a two-tool star for their football or for their baseball team. But I was really impressed with. I mean, in a game like that, obviously defense really dictated things, and it was going to be physical. And I thought he brought not just a physicality in his run defense, but the pressure he was providing against Rockhurst and a pretty formidable offensive line in terms of just sheer size, constantly harassing Charlie Luce, and I think kind of took them out of rhythm and Charlie as a passer, and really, I thought, shut down most of the Rockhurst run game up until they kind of, like I said, got some stuff going in the fourth quarter. Just really, really impressive kid, and the type of kid, Kevin, where after the game, we're talking to some folks on the Aquinas sideline, like, he must be really good at baseball, because the type of tape that he's putting on right now as a senior football defensive end at 6'3", 240, 250 pounds, he could absolutely be a late flyer candidate in the winter to maybe be a coveted preferred walk-on or get an MIAA scholarship or an FCS scholarship. And yet he's already fully locked in to baseball. And I think that goes to show you how good of a baseball player he is. But Kevin, really, really fun watch for us on the sidelines, and a guy that reminded me a ton of Ryan Mueller.
Yeah.
Another St. Thomas Aquinas defensive end that was a little undersized at 6'2", probably 235 coming out of high school, but the motor never stopped and was way more physical and strong than you would think, just kind of based on the naked eye. And he went on to do great things at K-State. I think Crew, again, if he's as talented as everyone says he is on the baseball field, big future for him and Lawrence on the diamond.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the motor because, he had maybe the biggest hit of the game, and it didn't occur where you usually see defensive ends making tackles. It was him getting to the sideline and absolutely smashing the guy along the sideline, and so really showed a lot in pursuit as well. While there wasn't a lot of scoring, I thought there were some good moments for the two members of the Aquinas backfield that we were really looking forward to seeing, quarterback LZ Slaughter and 2026 running back Cal Arndt. Ryan, I know LZ plays quarterback for Aquinas, but we talked on the show before the game and said it before the game when we saw him in person, and then after the game again. It's really tough to watch him, the frame that he has, how quick the feet are and everything, and not think, man, this guy would look really good on the other side of the ball.
Right. Well, I mean, the kid comes out in warmups and he looks like he's chiseled out of marble. And then you're picturing yourself as like a Rockhurst defender. Like, I have to tackle that down. Like, I have to bring him to the ground. So I get why there's an Army offer on the table, right? And maybe they see him on offense. But I'm with you, Kevin. And I asked LZ last year after their playoff win at Maize, has there been any talk with Coach Dreiling about maybe having you play both ways, or at least playing more on defense at linebacker? Because I think your physicality translates there, and your size, obviously. And he had a great answer, which was like, at Aquinas, we have enough numbers that they don't need me to go both ways. Like, you kind of got to pick. And I think he, at that point and still now, really likes to have the ball in his hands. And I thought he commanded that offense really well. And then, Kevin, I'll pitch it back to you for Cal Arndt, but all I'll say is I was really impressed with his footwork. And I thought his short area quickness, for a guy that stout that we kind of maybe thought was just more of a ground and pound kind of bruising back, I thought he showed a little bit an element of kind of dynamic there in terms of what he was able to do in tight spaces.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Aquinas runs that flex mode offense, and so typically the guy who's right behind the quarterback is almost like more of a fullback than you would think of like a single back type of being, because he's up a little bit closer to him and everything. LZ Slaughter's the fullback at Aquinas. He is the between the tackles muscle. Cal Arndt, we had Top Speed founder Joseph Poss on one of our previous shows, and he talked about how great Cal was in the weight room. And so I really thought, I'd seen the tape, but I really thought at the same time you're going to see a kid who's just kind of a block, maybe is going to be a powerful guy, not that he wouldn't have speed, but wouldn't necessarily have the side to side or the agility that I thought Cal really showed. I thought that was really impressive for him. He's a guy that you'll want to see grow a little bit, especially, from if you're projecting him into FBS. A lot of teams aren't looking at smaller running backs right now, shorter running backs right now. But at the same time, I really thought he was impressive. He scored the game-winning touchdown on a really kind of explosive run where he was able to get to the edge. And I think you make a great point. I thought he showed a lot more side to side and a lot more maybe even running back skill than I realized that he had going in.
No rebuttal for me. I was impressed with Cal Arndt. This, like you said, maybe not in terms of size, but there's going to be somebody out there that falls in love with what he does despite any kind of height measurement type stuff.
On the Rockhurst side, it was really good to see signal caller Charlie Luce. You already talked about the fact he was under pressure a lot. It kind of threw him off his rhythm. But this is also your second time seeing him in person this year. You've seen him this time in full pads. You saw him in a camp setting. So I guess rather than saying, what did you see from Charlie in this specific game, I'm going to throw it to you with, what do you think of Charlie Luce overall? What's your overall impression of him now that you've had multiple viewings?
I just think he's really accurate. I mean, that's to me that the amount of balls for the pressure that he was under, I thought the amount of balls that he put up that you were like, ooh, that's not a smart decision, were very few and far between. Even the passes that weren't connected or that Aquinas was able to, get PBUs on and that sort of thing, were put in areas that were, if they weren't catchable, they weren't problematic. And so that's what I like most about Charlie Luce. And again, he's a kid that didn't play. He wasn't the varsity starter for Rockhurst last year. For all intents and purposes, this is kind of his first run through this thing as a varsity starter. So to me, the more comfortable he gets in those type of situations, the better he's going to be. He can only grow from here. You're still seeing Charlie loose at a very kind of young stage in terms of what he can be as a long-term quarterback.
And that brings us to our prospect pit stop for this week, where we're headed to Derby to watch the undefeated Panthers take on 5-1 Maize South squad. Prospects all over the place in this one. But I feel like we might be most excited about a matchup between two of the state's top 2026 prospects, Derby offensive tackle Max Robinson, and Ryan, he'll probably have to block Maize South's Hunter Higgins at least at times.
Yeah, look at that marquee matchup right there. I mean, two of the top 5 guys in the state across the industry, not just 24/7, but the 24/7 sports composite that takes in, again, on 3 ESPN rivals. So both of these guys are really well thought of. And if you didn't think so just by the rating and everything you'll hear from Alan Trieu in a little bit, they've got the offers to back it up. A lot of different staffs in the region really believe in both of these kids. And I'm excited to see them because I personally haven't seen Max Robinson a whole lot in person. He was banged up at K-State's camp over the summer. And then for Hunter Higgins, it's been all tape for us up until now. And so we finally get a chance to see both of these guys in pads, in the flesh, kind of seeing what they're made of.
Yeah, I've seen Max a couple times in person now. This will be, I think, my third or fourth time seeing him. I got a chance to see him in pads a couple times last year. But I think the interesting thing there, Ryan, is 24/7 Sports has him listed as an interior offensive lineman. By all accounts, his dad is huge. I mean, like, as in like 6'9", type huge. And so if he continues to grow, that you're going to lose the IOL over the offensive line part, and he's going to be a really good tackle prospect because he is a really good athlete. He has a lot of those things that you look for at that spot. But even if he doesn't, I do think that he has the tools to be a really, really high-level interior offense.
I was going to say, when you watch the film and the highlights of Max Robinson, he's going to be a guy that's going to hit either way. Whether he's at an offensive guard or whether he's at a tackle, I think he's shown, even on some of the tape this season, he has the ability to fire off the block. And as you see in this clip, the footwork is the mobility for a kid his size is really impressive. But then he'll come back and he'll lay you down, like you see there in run blocking. And so that's where I think this is a kid, no matter which way you dice it, you're gonna take him, because he's either going to dominate as a run blocker in the interior, and maybe play in a scheme that where you can have him kind of get off the edge and be a pull kind of offensive guard, or he grows and becomes a tackle that is more than just, long and agile, but as you can see, has that kind of toughness factor that you find more from interior linemen. So I think that's why everybody is banking on Max Robinson to be a win. Doesn't matter where he projects, he's going to be a really well-balanced offensive lineman.
On the other side, looking at Hunter Higgins, he's a guy that I think, the athleticism is coming along, I feel like, Ryan, and you can see that in some of these clips, but I really like the way that he's able to win with his hands and his technique at this point.
It's a lot about technique. The other thing I noticed when you watch some of his junior tape so far is that he's able to win no matter where he's lining up. If he's at 5 tech, if he's at 3 tech, they're having him go all over the place. He is so physical. And I think he plays with great leverage, and he knows that he's got a powerful lower body just as much as a powerful upper body. So he's winning. If he does go up against guys that, have the upper body that can handle him, he can win with his feet too. You're seeing him drive guys back with the lower half too. The thing for me is going to be the agility that you mentioned. Is he projecting more as kind of a 3-man defensive end, or is there enough of a well-rounded package at defensive end where he can beat guys, playing farther off the ball, and kind of winning around the edge on larger offensive tackles? He have that kind of juice, that kind of bend. again, either way, I think you're seeing a lot of college coaches that are saying this kid's going to be something, right? We don't really care about where he fits necessarily right now, because he's either going to bulk up and be kind of a pass rushing defensive tackle, in a way, or he's going to be a guy that they can say, we're going to just even tweak up the agility. We're going to lean down and really work on some speed stuff. And now we've got a guy that can both rush the passer effectively and also anchor on the edge and hold guys from the outside, getting outside as a running back. So I'm really excited. I hope we see these guys line up a lot 1v1. I don't know if we'll get that lucky, but it's a great tool for us to really gauge both these guys. I know it's just a 1-game sample size. That's not always fair, but you also don't really get 2 guys of this caliber going one-on-one in the state like we're going to see on Friday night. So there's a heavy interest from you and I in this particular matchup.
Don't sleep on the 2025 talent in this one either. Tight end Deshaun Brame, he's a 4-star prospect. He's committed to Tennessee. But, Ryan, he's also having one of the best seasons of any player in the state of Kansas right now.
He's been freaky. I mean, the stuff he's doing on tape as a senior at Derby is pretty remarkable. You're seeing him in the slot. You're seeing the wheels that I don't know we really saw as a sophomore or a junior. Maybe the folks at Derby have seen this kind of stuff, but it speaks. Watch what he's able to do in space and breaking free from guys at his size. I mean, at a legit 6'5", possibly 6'6", 240, 250. And he's a guy that they're using as a gadget player right now. The hands have really come along. I mean, look at the way that he brings balls in. I'll say this, Kevin, when we saw him, what was it, about a year and a half ago at the UC Report Camp, you were looking at a guy coming out off of his, I think, sophomore year at that time, that was thought to be mostly blocking. I mean, that was his expertise, he was physical, he was big, and he was a hellacious blocker. But it was, is he going to develop in these other areas? Is he even that level of athlete, right? And over the next couple seasons, as we've seen, he's transformed himself into just an elite pass catcher, a route runner. His speed has gone through the roof. I mean, maybe it's James Tabor down there that's doing all this along with Deshaun's work ethic. But we knew this athleticism was in there, Kevin, but to see him really come into the modern day tight end, going from what was once just kind of thought to be, well, maybe he's a tight end, blocking tight end that could develop as an offensive tackle. I'm being serious, to a guy that is a lethal weapon as a pass catcher. And I'll say this too, Kevin, and you and I are as big a Lincoln Cure fans as you'll find. It's not going to surprise me if Deshaun Brame ends up kind of being able to come in year one and do more than Lincoln Cure in year one, simply because I think he is a little bit more well-rounded and he has been a little bit more tested. In terms of college ready, it's not that Lincoln isn't. I just think Deshaun might be more college ready right now and be able to transition quicker, even if you want to debate about ceilings all you want. And the top end, Deshaun Brame is proving himself. And it's unfair, Kevin, because any other year, Deshaun Brame would be the talk of the state. And we probably should be talking about it more, hand raised. But unfortunately for him, you've got this guy in Goodland, a great story and a freak athlete himself, that unfortunately, again, steals maybe some of the spotlight from Deshaun. But I'm excited to finally go down, see him again in person, and give him his kudos, because, boy, he has been tremendous this fall.
For better or worse, those two are probably going to be linked for quite a while, and people are going to want to see who pans out more. Like you said, it's kind of interesting because both of them popped on the scene fairly early. Lincoln for being sort of this freak athlete, more of a receiver prospect, Brame being maybe the quote-unquote more well-rounded guy, the guy who can block. And it's been a lot of fun to see them expand into their other areas. I think Lincoln's a much better blocker, more physical guy now than he was a year or two ago. And I think Brame is a guy that's gone the opposite way. He's a tight end who's getting carries on reverses, right? Yeah. Not just getting carries in those, but breaking them for touchdowns. And so it's been sort of a fun shift to watch. Somebody else who's committed, and they're committed more locally in this class, is a guy that I know you're looking forward to seeing in full pads because of the way he really exploded over this offseason. And of course, I'm talking about Kansas State commitment, Martell Jackson. What do you like about Martell? What do you want to see out of Martell?
Well, I mean, we were able to see him at the Mill Valley 7-on-7 team camp, and I thought he lived up to the billing there. I'm actually eager to see him cover more space. We talk about Maize South's offense. I think they're going to want to stretch the field. That's what I want to see from Martell Jackson. In 7-on-7, it's condensed. It's 50 yards an end, and I think he has proven himself to be a lockdown corner in short areas. How he covers in space, that deep ball. We've heard about the 4.3 speed. I want to see it. I think right now what we're seeing from Martell Jackson, for me, from a Kansas State perspective, isn't all that different from Echo Boydo, who, again, freak speed coming out of Lawrence High School. But I think where Martell might have the advantage is he is a little bit more physical right now. And I think he, has a little bit more of that like lockdown ability than Echo did, and has a little bit more on his frame. I mean, he's not huge, not bulking, but I think can stack up against run support maybe a little better than Echo could as a senior in high school. But that's kind of the comparison I have right now. I'm eager to see kind of how that pans out after watching him again on Friday.
Derby has talent up and down that roster per usual, and defensive tackle Mylan Colvin's a guy who picked up a Utah State offer coming out of September. Shout out Nate Dreiling, continuing his forays into the state. And Ryan, I know we always like talking about guys with fun tape. Arius Finley is fun. Like a lot of Derby running backs, he's small. He's also a 2027, so he does have some time to grow, but not a lot of guys really move like he does. I'm excited to see him again, after seeing him some last year. I'm excited for you to get a chance to see him in this setting too. Talking about Brain being one of the state's best players this year, a guy that we've previously mentioned as having a big year and sort of deserving some state honors is Maize South's quarterback, Tate McNew, having that kind of year as well. Ryan, you were just talking about Martell Jackson and needing to cover space. Maize South is probably going to make him cover space, and Tate McNew is a quarterback that if he's not snuggled up in coverage, he can make him pay.
Well, we're going to see, how Tate McNew operates outside the pocket a little bit because, Mylan Colvin, the transfer from Rose Hill, I think it took him a minute maybe to get his feet under him a little bit. And lately, the last couple of weeks, it seemed like he's really come on. And that's going to be a tough matchup for Maize South. I'm eager to see, if he does pressure the pocket, how does Tate McNew, who's kind of been kept clean, it seems like most of the year, and it's so good when he has that clean pocket to operate and can go through his fundamentals. Does he improvise if that does happen? He's got a lot of weapons, but you're right, Kevin. I mean, what we've seen from Tate so far this season, he's right up there with a Derek Morgan, with a Charlie Luce. I know he's coming off the loss against Aquinas, but some really polished quarterbacks in the 2025 class that maybe aren't going to be, Power 5 scholarship type guys, but really, really effective right now on Friday nights, and excited to see kind of where the future takes them.
We'll have our interview with 24/7 Sports Alan Trieu coming up. But first, let's hear from you guys over at the KCSN hotline powered by Mint Mobile. If you have any questions or comments for us here at Verbal Commitment, shoot us a text over at 913-407-6524, and we may just talk about it on the show. We also want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Ryan, it sounds crazy to say, but as our producer Nick Springer pointed out earlier today, basketball season is almost here. So if you need gear to stay warm out at your favorite school's football games, or the lighter stuff to wear inside your arena of choice and not sweat, or heck, you just want to look good walking around town repping your favorite school, Home Field Apparel has you covered. Kansas State, Missouri fans, all of them have more than 40 items apiece to choose from across all of those different categories. Head over to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code linked below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code HeyCSN at ticketsforless.com. Dealing with big wireless providers can be frustrating when you have unexpected overages, random fees, and always trying to negotiate for a lower bill. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So you can say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan's jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. And you can keep all of your high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And if you're worried about bringing your own phone and your contacts, you can bring all of that with Mint Mobile when you sign up for their 3-month plan. So ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. That's mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
We're back with the Verbal Commitment podcast sponsored by Home Field Apparel. And Ryan and I are joined by Alan Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst, probably the most tied-in guy in the Midwest. Alan, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, guys, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You had kind of an interesting entry point, I feel like, into the scouting field in terms of, the way you started with the Senior Bowl and kind of going in your spare time and the combine and all of those things. Can you just give a little bit of background in sort of how you got into the industry?
Yeah, the quick story of this is that we were learning HTML in 8th grade, and you had to make a website. I made a website, a draft website. This is in 1998 or something like that. And so, on Netscape, whatever Netscape Navigator's HTML editor was, I made that GeoCities website. And there were so few draft sites around at that time that I actually kind of started to get some views and some clicks. And eventually I got credentialed for the combine in high school. So started covering that. And then through just meeting some of the right people, started doing some writing for Scout, which is, you're very familiar. And then that became 24/7. Kind of got asked to come over and do a little more high school, run the Michigan high school site, help out with the U of M site and the MSU site. And so I ended up liking high school more. And so I started doing more college football recruiting than draft. But that was how it started as a 14-year-old having to be driven to the combine by my mom.
I think the first time we met was maybe like 2010 Army All-America Bowl-ish, right around there. I was covering Texas at the time for Scout as well. Ryan and I, we've been covering Kansas recruiting for a really long time. And one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is how the state really feels like it's exploded in terms of Division I talent. It's gone from a state that, say, in 2005, 2006, the top guy in the state was a 3-star kid. Nobody really paid attention to it. So now you're looking at, in this class, you've got 4/5 star guys, 2 of which are 5-star guys. From just a Midwest or even a national standpoint, is that something you've noticed that, hey, this is a state that is either producing more talent or people are starting to notice the talent in the state?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. I think it's all of the things you just mentioned. I also think that some of the states, I know it from covering the Midwest and stepping over into more traditionally considered rural areas like in Iowa and Wisconsin, where they had to catch up in terms of how there's off-season training. Is there 7-on-7 or their place? Now I think Kansas has that. There's more opportunities. There are the top speeds and places like that. There's the 810 varsity combines. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening there that didn't exist before that I think helps that. But I think the talent did exist there. It just needed to be cultivated and seen. And I always say, if we start kind of prioritizing an area that is a little bit newer to producing a bunch of talent, and that talent doesn't end up turning out, we start to reevaluate. Like, maybe we've overshot some of these guys from certain parts of the country. And with Kansas, a lot of those players have gone on to do really well. And we've struck out and missed on some guys who were lower ranked guys who ended up doing well, walking on even at places and doing well. And I can remember Michigan coming over and taking Ronnie Bell and nobody really knowing who he was. And then he turns out. So if those guys all had fallen flat on their faces, maybe we wouldn't have so many highly ranked Kansas guys. But I think the guys who sort of pioneered the way for this bunch all made good on their opportunities.
Alan, Kevin, more the KU guy of this show, myself, clearly the K-State guy of the bunch. You actually go back a little bit in terms of both those staffs, having followed them, kind of gotten to know them, connected through their times in North Dakota State, Buffalo. Can you speak a little bit to Lance Leipold and Chris Kleiman over the years, their philosophy in terms of what you've noticed trends that they have in terms of recruiting and how they go about their business?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, generally speaking, winning translates to every level. So if you've learned how to win at Whitewater, and you've learned how to win at NDSU and places like that, those are dominant programs. But it's not like they just run through a bunch of teams worse than them either. They face really good competition year after year, and you're also not just pulling in top recruits. You're having to find guys who, generally speaking, the other, the G5s and the P4s and whatever the schools around your area don't want. You have to find some gems. And I think having come up through that and learned how to do that and figured out how to evaluate guys at camp and kind of know what to look for in terms of the body types you like and the athletic profiles you like and what's hit in the past, I think that really serves you well as you move up the chain. So, and then with Lance Leipold, it's not like Buffalo was a place that was easy to recruit at either. You're talking about recruiting, and especially in the MAC, people don't realize sometimes how good the MAC is and how hard it can be for a middle to bottom tier MAC team to climb to the top of that conference. They had some pretty established teams in the conference at that point. And look at how many of those MAC coaches, the Matt Campbells and the PJ Flecks of the world, are now at major programs. And so I think I think that they've brought that philosophy over. And I think what you have to be able to do is you can't take a class of 25 sleepers that no one wants at Kansas and Kansas State. You have to learn how to win some big boy recruiting battles while keeping that philosophy. And I think both staffs have done a really good job. When you look at their classes up, we can go out and go toe to toe and we can land an Avery Johnson, but we're still going to offer some guys at camp. We're going to take a Callan Barta, or we're going to find some guys at our camp still. So I really like how both staffs have not forgotten what got them there, but also adapted their recruiting philosophies to being at these bigger programs now.
Now, in Kansas City, obviously, there's a third program in the mix, and that's the Missouri Tigers, a program that quite well, having covered them and the St. Louis area. Sounds like long before even you were really entrenched in Kansas City. What have you seen from Eli Drinkwitz since he stepped on the scene there? Obviously, we've seen their rise in kind of in the rankings, right, in team recruiting rankings. But how is Missouri going about their business a little differently than maybe under Gary Pinkel and Barry Odom?
Yeah, they're extremely aggressive. And it was to the point that when he first came on the scene, people outside of Missouri almost kind of laughed at Drinkwitz a little bit. Some of the things that he was doing in recruiting, pulling up on a big truck or doing whatever he needs to do. But those things tend to work, and I think when you boil it down, when you take away some of those bells and whistles, what the foundation for that is you have a head coach that really, really cares about recruiting. And you guys know from covering this, you go around the country and there's a lot of different levels to how much your head coach participates in recruiting. There's a huge spectrum of that. And I'd say Eli Drinkwitz is on the very high end of coaches who have their hands on in the recruiting process. There's not a recruit that comes through there that he doesn't actively recruit himself. He doesn't just come in at the end and close it out. He's very involved throughout the process. And so I think when you have that combined with their, moves to the SEC and then what they're able to do with NIL, I really don't think before Eli Drinkwitz got there, right? Williams Nwaneri would not be on that roster.
Right.
And Luther Burden would not be on that roster. And they wouldn't have been really on the verge of signing Ryan Wingo There's a bunch of guys on that roster that they wouldn't have been there under the past regimes. And so I think for me, when people ask me about the impact of NIL on recruiting and can, teams kind of shift where they stack up in recruiting, to me, Missouri is the best example of a school who kind of went from like a middle of the road recruiting team to now battling it out at a national level for 5 stars and winning some of those battles really through the last couple of years of NIL and having a new staff in place.
If you were to make sort of a map of what Missouri recruits, it maybe shifts a little bit more toward SEC country than it used to before they had some success. They feel comfortable going down into Georgia and some of those states to compete with guys. I think for Kansas, because of the connections on the staff, you almost see them stretch up north into Big Ten country a lot more than they used to. I know there are a lot of guys that you and I talked about in last year's class, Isaiah Marshall, Jalen Todd, Austin Alexander being guys like that. What is it about that stat? And is it sustainable? Is it something that Kansas can continue to recruit? Because it's not necessarily a traditional recruiting ground for Kansas. Traditionally, it's been more Big 12 country, lower Midwest into Texas, et cetera.
Yeah. So first, I do think, I've run into some of the KU staff. There's a lot of the time in Michigan from their past stops. I'm a Grand Valley alum, so I remember when Chris Simpson was on the staff there. And so they have some ties. And what's interesting is Detroit is one of those cities where the people there, and especially the football community, is extremely loyal to whoever wants to come in there and recruit that. And you see that a little bit in Kansas City and St. Louis with a little bit of like, who shows us that they care about our kids? And there's always a little bit, you guys also know this from covering the state, is like there's always a little bit of this feeling that the home team isn't doing enough. They're always not taking enough in-state kids, right? And it's not always their fault. Michigan and Michigan State can't take them all. So the feeling before was like, who's this next team that's going to come in? Because a lot of those guys in the past were going to like Toledo. And that's how you ended up seeing some of those MAC schools, Western, Central, they're like, well, it's great for those places, but why is there not another kind of Power 4 team coming in? And I think Kansas has taken advantage of that. And it's so loyal in Detroit that they remember Gilbert Brown being there. That comes up. And they remember them coming into Ann Arbor and taking Tyrone Miller. That comes up. So there was already a good feeling about Kansas. And now that they've really prioritized it, Isaiah Marshall is an extremely popular figure within the state. He was a star since middle school. He won state championships. He's going to, they noticed that kid went to Kansas and that Kansas prioritized him. So I think it's very sustainable. And I think success breeds more success. And so when they see those kids playing and they see what, not just the guys they've recruited, but the Michigan kids they've taken out of the portal, I don't really see that slowing down. I think Kansas is pretty entrenched, and Detroit is just and I'm saying Detroit, I'm really talking about the entire state of Michigan. But specifically with Detroit, that community is going to, no matter who else comes in, they're going to remember that Kansas had been taking care of and really prioritizing the recruits there.
I loved it. I love that point because Ryan and I talk about it all the time. In some ways, as weird as it sounds, K-State takes lumps because they recruit Kansas so well that when they don't offer a kid, it's almost seen as more negative for K-State than it is for Kansas because Kansas doesn't have the history of taking his in-state kids. They say, hey, well, why isn't K-State taking our kid? And they almost, get it rougher than Kansas does in those situations.
Well, you know how, they always say, no matter how you expand the playoff field, if you expand it to 16, the 17th team is going to be upset. It's like in March Madness where the 67th and 68th teams are like, well, we get it. If you take 10 in-state kids, the 11th is going to be mad. If you take 12, the 13th is going to be like, well, why did you take all those guys and not me? So it's almost like nothing you can do. I think you have to, and you're going to miss on some guys. And so there's always some kid in Michigan who goes to a MAC school and gets drafted. And then Michigan, or heaven forbid for those schools, a Sauce Gardner goes to Cincinnati and they get torched for it. It's like you can't be perfect. So it's just going to always happen with those in-state schools. So I think what I like about what Kansas and Kansas State do is they get so many of those guys to camp that at least they can say they did their best to evaluate them. And so you try to leave no stone unturned the best you can.
Alan, we're almost 14 minutes into this interview, but I've got to hit you with a hard-hitting question here. And so I hope you're ready. And I know that there's folks out there that are listening. They're like, this is what I've been wanting to know. This is the answer I've been waiting for. We get it every day. Kevin still gets it. I get it. I know get it. How do I get stars? How do I get more stars, Alan? How in as simple form as you can answer that for everyone out there that always wants to know, how do I get stars?
Okay, so the first thing I will say about this is I'll admit that we work within a flawed system because we don't really give 1 stars. We don't ever give 1 stars. And there's only 32 5 stars in the country. So you're really trying to fit thousands of recruits into 3 boxes, right? And the 4-star box is still pretty small comparatively. So first of all, when we get the question like, why am I just the 3-star? I'm like, you're not really just the 3-star, Or somebody says, I'm a 2-star. How am I a 2-star? I'm a really good high school football player. Well, you're not a 2-star high school football player. You're a 2-star college football recruit. So we've already weeded out all of the guys who can't play college football. And we've taken the guys who can play college football and then put them into these 4 boxes. So you're a 2-star football recruit, right? It means you're a scholarship player. And so I think, first of all, that's a big misconception. You do have to be good at football. People think it's about, we get accused every year of overvaluing the underwear Olympics. That's not true. I mean, we watch a lot of film. We go to a lot of games. If that was the case, I would not be. We're putting a lot of miles on to go to games every week. I would just sit home and wait for combine numbers if that's what we did. Okay, I would not be sweating it out at all of these camps in the summer. I almost got heat stroke at Lindenwood one of those years. I wouldn't do all of that.
Grant, you almost froze to death when all of us were at UC Report in Kansas City.
That too. Yeah, you never know what you're going to get. And I go to games. We're going to games every week. Our whole staff does that. It's, so now saying that, when you start to watch, unless it's the top few guys in the country, at a certain point, all the game tapes start to look pretty similar. They're all good high school football players. So you have to separate them somehow. How do you figure out, the difference on video of the 14th best receiver in the country and the 52nd best receiver in the country is not as wide as people think it is. Those huddle tapes are going to look pretty similar. Mm-hmm. So the way that you separate that is by some other measure of athleticism. The combine times do matter, and it has to be a combine that we trust. And other sports matter. Your track times will matter, especially if you're a skill guy or you're a linebacker that happens to run really fast on the track. That's going to help put you above the other linebackers who have similar tape to you. So the more that you can do in terms of getting things verified, the more that you can do in terms of, playing other sports, playing other positions. I know that's not always in the player's control, but that helps. If you're a corner and no one throws at you, having some offensive tape and some special teams helps. So we take all of that into account. It's really hard to rank thousands of players, and it's hard to get a lot of information on them. So we take in everything that we can take in. That's why we ask for the track times and the shot numbers and the discus numbers, and then you start to sort it all out from there. Just give me all of the information, and then we'll process what of it matters. So sometimes when we're taking in that information, people are kind of like, well, why do you want that? That has nothing to do with football. We're just taking in everything that we can and then figuring out what matters to what degree. And so I think the more that you can do and the more that you think of it as like a resume, the more that you can put on there, then you have a better chance of getting ranked and started.
Kevin, let me jump in with one more here, just because I think it ties up on to that last question too, because it's a popular one that we get on message boards all the time. It's going on right now at gopowercat.com with RJ Collins. And that is, and I know the answer here because I've kind of been behind the scenes with you guys, but I think sometimes there's a misconception too with fans of, well, he got ranked higher once the Alabama offer came in, once the USC offer came in. They never bump up a guy from K-State. I always note Gus Hawkins last year, but it does happen. But what's the explanation there for the folks that are kind of against the recruiting industry in that sense of, well, we're a little guy and our guys will never get bumped up until they get the Alabama offer, the USC offer, et cetera?
Yeah. So I think if you look around the internet and you look at the message boards of those schools, the bigger schools, quote unquote, they don't think we do them any favors either. There was a year where Ohio State, 21 of their 24 commits were 4 or 5 stars, and they complained endlessly about the 3 that weren't. And, some of those schools think every school has says the Bama thing. Even like Georgia fans and Michigan fans go, well, wait till Bama offers. And then I go, you guys are in blue blood too. Like, what are you talking about? Like your whole class is ranked highly. So if there was a conspiracy in favor of those schools, which there's not, those schools certainly don't know it. Those fan bases certainly don't feel that way. So first of all, there's that. The second is I think that people are still locked into that mindset from when the industry started. And there may have been a percentage of that because we just didn't have the information.
Yep.
Gus Hawkins, if Gus Hawkins was coming out in 2002, it's possible that nobody in the entire industry would have known anything about him or seen. I would have had to have tried to get his school to mail me a VHS tape.
Yeah.
I think so people are still locked into that mindset because at that point we were just very limited by what we knew. And what we knew was, this guy's really good and this is his offer list. And so you did kind of go off of those things more. Now we know so much about each individual kid. I think the industry has grown so much that we take pride in we really want to hit on Gus Hawkins, right?
Right.
We're not really celebrating Jeremiah Smith right now. Right? Like, it's pretty obvious he's doing exactly what he could do. But if Gus Hawkins hits, we'll be celebrating that. We will spike the ball in front of everybody. If that one hits, right? Where it's like, Ryan Williams, sure. It's great he's doing what he's doing. So I think we've now started to take pride in finding those guys. And on that note, we have a big update coming out. Most of that time was spent watching the 85s, the 86s, those kind of guys. We even went through last year a lot of the FCS classes so that we don't get skewered on a Cooper Cup. So people want to complain about, bumping certain schools commits. We really are hoping to play. I'm as proud of Cooper DeJean as any evaluation in the last 10 years. We would rather hit on those, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's
just hard to do. You have to really go on a limb. You have to really go out on a limb, and some of those guys are really hard to see coming. So that's how I feel about it. And so then the last thing I'll say, and I'll let you jump in, is that a lot of the time when you see Bama offered our commit and then he got bumped up, it's because we're also seeing something that Bama is seeing. If this guy has made strides as a senior and all of a sudden the tape is just ridiculous and all of these schools start offering, well, we would have to really see something to the contrary to not bump that guy. Being like, all of these schools are completely wrong, but a lot of the time we're watching the same tape they are. So that's why it seems like it all kind of flows together, but it's not because we've made a real point of not just doing things because the schools are doing it. And then you'll turn around and say, people, you won't, maybe sometimes we don't agree, right? Kid will get a bunch of offers and we don't agree. And then those same message board fans who accuse us of a Bama bump will now say, like, well, this guy got a Bama offer and you didn't bump him when you think you know more than Nick Saban. So we get it from all sides.
It's kind of funny to look at that whole process and everything, because when you look at when you guys update and release certain updates, sometimes it's almost unfortunate because it's coincidental that, hey, this guy has great senior tape. So the senior tape got him the Alabama offer, but the senior tape is also, this is your first update since the senior tape came out. So you guys are basically offering off of the same exact thing that they're seeing, but maybe the Alabama offer came out a week or two earlier because that's when the update just sort of falls in the calendar.
Right. And if you look at when the kid puts out like a mid-season tape, a lot of the time we're tagged in there with all of those coaches. And so we're all getting it at the same time. So that's why it seems like, oh, well, they're just reacting to that. But that's the first time we're all seeing updated information. So that's what happens. But I do think, like, I'm not gonna cover it up. I do think that a certain degree of that used to happen, but it wasn't because you were bumping guys because of where they went to school. We were just so limited on being able to find information on some of the guys who were from more rural areas. Like, we still get hated on for JJ Watt in 2007. And I was like, there was not a single person in our industry going to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to go look at a guy that was committed to Central Michigan. It just wasn't going to happen. You could bet pretty surely that today, if JJ Watt was coming out, I don't know that he would have been ranked where he was supposed to be ranked. He would have been ranked a lot better than where he was. So we at least would have known a lot more about him.
Right.
It's when you look at it now, and I don't want to belabor the point too much, but Missouri, for instance, just got a commitment from Dakota Terrell, 1A Oklahoma high school football guy. Would you have even known about him 10 years ago, or at least not to that extent, certainly?
The story I always tell is when I first started, I was working underneath other people at Scout, and they would give me a list of guys like, we've heard these names. Will you find a way to get a hold of these kids? And so you'd call the school. I'd do whatever you could do to cold call and figure out anything about them. And occasionally you would call a high school, and they would say, like, oh, he's been committed to Indiana for like 3 weeks. Like, that's how little, now you can't get, things don't last, secrets don't last 3 minutes when a kid commits. So I think, that just shows how much harder it used to be. So we wouldn't have known anything about Dakota Terrell. You guys can tell me more probably about kids going to Northwest Missouri State and we may have known about some like the middle of Kansas's class in 2001. I mean, it's almost, we know a lot about a lot of guys. There's a lot of dudes that are going to be walking on places that you guys know a lot more about. Some kids that, we're discussing guys that like might not even play college football. You might go play another sport. Like, there's no way we would have known all of this information. It's not even comparable.
Even with the boom of talent in the state and us doing better at recognizing it, like you were talking about, Kansas isn't necessarily known for producing 5-star guys. I mean, I remember when the Brown brothers came through, and Ryan does as well. And there have been a few guys over the years, but not many. This class, there's 2 of them. What about Andrew Babalola and Lincoln Cure kind of stood out for you guys to take the leap on guys like that and say, hey, Kansas has 2 5-stars this year, at least at this point in the rankings?
Mm-hmm. I think so. How our company is structured is we have a scouting team that overviews like the whole country, and the recruiting guys like myself, we help filter information to them, and there's a lot of reasons for that I think are good, that we have kind of those eyes in the sky. And they really picked out Babalola as, I think when I first started, I didn't understand how much of a projection it was. And it was at this time where Iowa was taking tight ends and turning them into tackles, and that idea was pretty like new back then. It was like, you're doing what?
What's those?
It was still the kind of, back then, it was the days of you just take the biggest, strongest recruit a ready set 300 pounder and you bring him. It's like, you're going to recruit some 240 pound dude and you're going to turn him into a tackle. And then it started working. And I think that model has now led us to where Andrew Babalola is, which is where you want to catch a guy on the rise, even if he hasn't played a ton of football. And when you look around the NFL, there's a lot of guys who didn't play offensive tackle or who didn't play football. There's a lot of failed centers and power forwards from the basketball court that come over and become really good NFL offensive linemen or defensive linemen. And that's where it's at with Andrew. And so we always knew he had the upside. I mean, when he debuted in the top 100, he hadn't actually played it was all scrimmage film that we were looking at. So it was like it's being projected that he's going to get there. We know full well that if he doesn't, he's going to have to get pulled back. And I think the biggest thing with him is that over the last 2 seasons, he's shown that he's at least on the path. I don't think he's there yet, but he's on the path of where, if you're talking about as a college sophomore or junior, is he an impact starting tackle at a high major school? And I think he's tracking that way. The biggest thing with the basketball guys is, they're going to show some athleticism out there. They're going to have some length. He's going to be able to move. Does he take to the physicality of the game? And I think for Andrew, he has. And then with Lincoln, it's pretty obvious, just frame, athleticism, ball skills, very much fits the new age tight end. And I think it's really awesome too that we continue to find kids that in Kansas that aren't right there in like the Kansas City area, because it would really be easy to just swing through the Blue Valley School and just sweep that. It's I think it's awesome that we're continuing to find guys in different parts of the state.
Alan, I'll finish with a fun one here, and I'll go hand raised and put myself out there first before you give your answer. But I think it's always fun to look back and say the ones that you got, the one that was a home run for you, and the one that you look back and the face palm emoji of I ate that one a little bit. For me, like I said, I'll throw myself on the spit first here. I whiffed so hard on Isaiah Simmons. I whiffed so hard on Isaiah Simmons. I just, for whatever reason, having watched his senior year, there was just something about him that I just wasn't sure was going to work at Clemson. Didn't know like really what position he was going to play, on and on and on, all that to say, big miss. But I'm always curious from a guy like you that's been in the industry so long, what's kind of your home run tale? And is there one regrettable moment in recruiting that you had, evaluating a player and looking forward to their future?
So you're talking in general or a state of Kansas guy?
I would say in general, but if it pertains to this region, that would be even better.
Okay. I just comes to mind because we just said it, Cooper DeJean. I think we were the only site that even had him as a 4-star. And we had him as not just a 4-star, he was a top 150, maybe a top 100 guy. We invited him to the All-American Bowl. That's a pretty big hit right there for a guy who was playing extremely small ball in Iowa. I think only had Iowa and Northern Iowa. I don't think Iowa State even offered him, and they offer a lot of players and do a really good job in evaluating. And so, and I can't take sole credit for that. Barton Simmons, who's now at Vanderbilt, did a really great job on that eval as well. We had back-to-back in Iowa with Tyler Linderbaum, who we also invited to the All-American Bowl, and Cooper DeJean. So those two right away pop in my head as like, okay, well, we kind of stood out from the pack and went out on a limb. There's a lot of, the facepalm guys.
Yeah.
I would say it was early on, but TJ Watt, I'm a Steelers fan too, so it extra hurts. And we knew that we had messed JJ up. The industry had missed him. And then there was a brother in between them, Derek. And he was a gray shirt. And then TJ came along, and I actually went up there to see him and met him. And he was like a 205-pound wildcat quarterback and wide receiver. And I just thought, like, this isn't JJ. This isn't. And so that one is probably because I actually went there. I actually went up there. I have no excuse on that one. And every week when he's tearing it up for the team that I love, I wish I would have done something different.
I'm sure we've all got a number of those. Some of them feel pretty good. I know at Scout, working down in Texas when Greg Powers was there, I think we were the only site that had Patrick Mahomes as a 4-star. And that was a difficult one just because everybody you talked to said there's no way he makes it to the gridiron. And so I don't think it was that anybody looked at him and said, oh, he's not a good football player. It was just, well, why should we spend a super amount of time on this evaluation because of all that? I thought Case Reuter was going to be really good, Ryan, coming out of Kansas. I think he was number one in his in-state class. And he was a guy that I felt like, one, I allowed myself to be talked into, I think, the quarterback stuff maybe being a little bit further along than it actually was. But I also thought that there was no way he would miss as an athlete. because, he was, had such a great frame, was a good athlete, felt like, okay, he'll, if it doesn't work at quarterback, somebody will throw him to the other side of the ball and he'll be Nick Reed or somebody like that. And so that's one that I'll eat for in-state stuff. Alan, for people who want to kind of follow along or follow your socials, where should they read you? Where should they head on Twitter/X?
Yeah, Twitter/X. I wonder when we're all going to stop using the name Twitter, but I'm still hanging on to it also. So at Alan Trieu, ALLENTRIEU. That's mostly where I post on social if I'm not on 24/7 message boards, but get over 24/7. I post a lot of my stuff there. Try to be as interactive on all the team site boards as I can when I have something to offer. So, and I try to respond as much as I can on Twitter as well. If people have questions and they at me or they DM me, do get a lot on both, but do the best that I can and try to get to everybody.
How do I get stars? How do I get my stars?
That is, man, I know it's kind of a joke, a cliche thing. If I had a nickel for every time I got asked that, if I truly had a nickel for every time I asked that question, I got asked that question, I wonder how much money I would actually have, because it gets asked I almost have to roll myself to not roll my eyes at the question, because I'm like, okay, this person is asking this in good faith. They're sure the kid is trying. But we get asked so much that it's hard for me not to just be like, oh, God, like again. So I try to react. They don't know. You get asked this 600 times a day. So, and I'm pretty ready with the answer, as you can tell from how I answer.
I had a kid at camp one time who, he said, "Why am I only a 2-star?" I said, "Well, you have to understand, a 2-star means you're a solid Division I prospect." And he was just like, "Oh, well, thanks." So I think some of it too is maybe just not that definition of what it means to be.
Yes, this is my thing on this, right? Like if I used to read music and movie reviews a lot growing up, and if a movie or an album got 2 out of 5 stars, it was not good. Okay?
Yeah.
You go on Yelp and a restaurant has 2 stars or a hotel has 2 stars. That's not good. But in this case, we've already thrown out all of the hotels and the albums that aren't any good. We've basically taken only the best albums of all time, all the best albums of the year, and then re-ranked them on a 5-star scale. So I think that's where people get confused, is because in any other industry, a 2-star is bad and a 3-star is average. So that's what people think that means. But so I get that. And I don't always think that. So that's why I don't roll my eyes at the question, because I don't think we always adequately explain that. Mm-hmm. So I try to do my best to give some context to it. Now, saying that, I'll just have given that explanation. People will hear it and they'll still ask me why they're 2 stars.
Well, thanks again for swinging by for the explanation and the context. And thanks to the rest of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.